Welcome back to the Foundry by Forge College. I'm your host, and today we're tackling a really fun one, working with ENS records and human-readable addresses. Now, if you caught our last explainer on analyzing network traffic and load dynamics, you know we were deep in the weeds looking at the heavy machinery of the network. But today we're zooming in on the human side of that traffic, which really boils down to identity. Think of this explainer as drafting the engineering blueprint for how users actually interact with the blockchain on a day-to-day basis. Okay, let's dive into this. Here's our roadmap for today. First, the decentralized contact card. Second, core ENS record types. Third, real-world ENS scenarios. Fourth, the defensive read workflow. And finally, some final takeaways. Section 1, the decentralized contact card, mapping abstract blockchain data to human identity. So the absolute best mental model to hold on to here is that an ENS name isn't just some basic string of characters. It's actually a highly structured, decentralized contact card, and it has very specific slots for data. But to get to that contact card, we have to talk about the resolver. The resolver is basically a smart contract designated by the ENS registry that actually stores and exposes the typed on-chain records, things like an address, text, and a content hash for a specific name. You know, reading data from the blockchain can sometimes feel a bit complex, kind of like a bureaucratic scavenger hunt. Reading a name actually requires two separate lookups. First, you have to ask the registry, hey, who holds the file? And then it points you to the resolver, where you have to ask, okay, cool, now it's actually in the file. There's a very mechanical split happening here. The registry just maps the domain name to a resolver contract. That's its whole job. The resolver, on the other hand, holds the methods that return the actual addresses, text, or hashes. For today's explainer, our focus is going to be entirely on the right side of this equation, the data model that's resting securely inside the resolver. Moving right along to Section 2, core ENS record types. Let's dissect the slots in our contact card. Let's open up those slots and see how this builds. There are four main ones on the ENS contact card. You've got the address record, which is accessed via the addr method, and that contains actual blockchain addresses. Then the text record, using the text method, which handles metadata. Next is content hash, calling the content hash method, and that holds IPFS pointers. And finally, reverse resolution, using the name method, which contains the primary name. Think of these as the fundamental building blocks of our whole identity blueprint. Now, what's really interesting about this split between address types is the distinction you have to make. On one hand, the native address gives you the standard 20-byte canonical Ethereum address. But we also have coin-specific addresses for other chains and protocols entirely. And this highlights a massive, massive danger, assuming every ENS name only has an Ethereum address. Imagine the sheer anxiety of sending funds into the absolute void of the wrong blockchain just because your app misread the record. Always ask what coin types your application actually needs. Next up, we have text records. These are simple key value pairs, things like an avatar, an email, or a description. But notice the catch. These are strictly treated as untrusted user metadata. Why? Because users can literally put anything they want in there. If you're building an app, please, for the love of Web3, don't blindly trust a text record claiming a user is the emperor of Ethereum without validating and sanitizing that data first. Trust me, it is a very quick way to break your UI, or honestly much worse. Then we have the content hash. This is formally defined as a multi-codec prefixed payload pointing to content-addressed resources, like IPFS or Swarm. Now, if the phrase multi-codec prefixed payload sounds like alien technology to you, let's demystify it a bit. Think of it like a highly specific shipping label. It doesn't just say where the package is located, it actually tells your browser exactly how to open the package once it arrives. It's way smarter than just stuffing a basic URL into a text field. The final slot in our blueprint is reverse resolution. This is the inverse operation, taking an address and mapping it back to an authoritative canonical name under the add.reverse node. Honestly, this is the visual anchor for wallets and user profiles. Instead of a user staring at some scary, completely unreadable 20-byte hex string, they get a friendly, readable name. It completely changes the user experience. Section 3, real-world ENS scenarios. Let's put this blueprint into practice. Understanding these scenarios is absolutely vital for students in Forge College courses who are out there building real, robust, decentralized apps right now. We're going to run our contact card through 3 real-world stress tests just to see exactly where things can bend or break. Number 1, wallet identity display. Number 2, dApp payment routing. And number 3, hosting content with content hash. Scenario 1, wallet identity display. Let's say you paste alice.eth into a wallet. It fetches the native address and the avatar text record, right? But here is the trick. The wallet absolutely must verify the reverse record. If it skips that step, it might display a totally misleading identity. You always want to make sure the address actually points back to the name to avoid any divergence that could trick the user. Scenario 2. dApp payment routing. Welcome to the multi-chain marketplace dilemma. Let's say a decentralized app needs to route a payment. The dApp has to be coin-aware. It needs to check the coin-specific address first for the buyer's selected chain. Only if that isn't present should it fall back to the native Ethereum address. Making assumptions here literally leads to lost funds. No pressure. And Scenario 3. Hosting content with contenthash. When a creator publishes a site to IPFS, a browser fetches it by parsing that multi-coded prefix we talked about earlier, something like CIDV1. The client has to parse this prefix to know how to retrieve the content. If it fails and just lazily treats the bytes as an opaque string, the user just gets a broken link. And that is definitely not a great look for your app. Section 4. The defensive read workflow. Protecting users from misconfigurations. So the crucial point here is that reading this data isn't just a simple fetch request. It requires strategy. Think of this as a defensive wiring schematic for your app. Step 1. Resolve the name hash to find the resolver. Step 2. Use a coin-aware address getter. Always check for specific coins before falling back to native Ethereum. Step 3. Sanitize text metadata. Again, do not trust user inputs blindly. Step 4. Parse the content hash properly so you can route to the correct content network. And Step 5. Verify the reverse node to ensure the canonical name actually matches the address. This is exactly how an application should sequence its questions to the ENS contact card. I really want to emphasize a crucial rule here. Listen to this. Clients should treat text values as untrusted, user-controlled metadata. Validate or sanitize strings before rendering. Just let that sink in for a second. ENS provides the amazing decentralized infrastructure, but your application is entirely responsible for the security-critical logic and sanitation. Do not offload your security to a text record. Now, we also have to talk about time to live, or TTL, and caching. Caching UI flows with a small on-chain TTL is great. It dramatically improves the user experience by making things super snappy. But caching can also lead to stale address mistakes. If a user updates their address and your app is still using an old cached version, a payment could easily go to the wrong place. So for critical operations, you absolutely must requery the live resolver state. And always show manual thumbs-up confirmations to the user before sending any funds. Section 5. Final takeaways. Preparing for smart contract integration. And this brilliantly illustrates why mastering the read side of ENS is exactly what prevents catastrophic bugs on the write side. Let's do a rapid-fire recap of our blueprint rules to make sure these technical guardrails are fully memorized. 1. Distinguish address types. Always know if you're looking at coin-specific or native. 2. Sanitize all text fields. Trust absolutely no one. 3. Parse content hash prefixes to avoid broken links. And 4. Always consult reverse resolution to ensure the identity is authoritative. So I'll leave you with this provocative question. Is your app's defensive read workflow actually strong enough to prepare ENS names for smart contract integration? Think about it, because that is exactly what we're going to be tackling in our next lesson, preparing ENS names for smart contract integration. Head over to forge.college to continue your Web3 learning journey and explore a bunch of other amazing topics. Until next time, keep learning and keep building securely.